Hi everyone, my name is Benjamin Nowak with Monster Bass, and in today's video I want to talk about one of my favorite baits that I never leave home without, and that is a jig. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions about jig fishing is that it only catches big bass, and because of that, your number of bites goes down. But I want to share with you guys a technique called swim jigging that will help you catch both numbers of fish as well as really big bass, no matter where you're fishing. Whether you're fishing from a boat like I have here behind me, a kayak, or from the shore, this is a technique you can use to catch both numbers of fish as well as really big fish. Now, one of the best things about a jig is its versatility. You can fish this bait a bunch of different ways, and you can make it imitate a variety of forage. Whether you're fishing shallow ponds that have bluegill in them, the deep Great Lakes, you can make it look like a perch, a goby. You can fish it to make it look like a shad or crawfish by changing up the profile of the jig and the profile and colors of the trailer that you put on it. So a jig is extremely versatile, but swim jigging in particular is a great way to imitate a variety of bait fish or crayfish swimming through the water column to catch big bass. Now, swim jigging is predominantly a shallow water technique. What this means is I'm not taking this and fishing it over really deep water, although you can, but I'm typically fishing it around shallow cover and shallow water areas, whether that's shallow grass, shallow docks, laydowns, or really just areas where I know big bass are living. I'm taking a swim jig and I'm casting it out there and just slowly reeling it in because it covers a lot of water quickly, helps me determine if bass are there, and looks extremely natural. Before we get too much more into the technique, let's talk about the gear that I'm using. And the jig that I'm throwing is a Booyah bankroll jig. Now, this is a 3/8 ounce size, and I really like that 3/8 ounce size when I'm fishing a swim jig because I can fish it from inches of water down to about 10 foot just by changing the way that I'm reeling the bait in, the speed that I'm reeling that bait, how I'm fishing it through the water column. So anywhere less than 10 foot of water, a 3/8 ounce swim jig is my go-to. The rod that I'm throwing it on is a 7'3" medium heavy power rod. Now, anything 7 foot, 7'6" is perfect length for throwing a swim jig, but I really recommend a bait casting setup, medium heavy or heavy power, because you're fishing a heavy wire hook around heavy cover, and there is a weed guard in front of that, so you need to be able to set that hook and drive that hook home. So a bait casting setup is recommended, medium heavy or heavy power. The bait casting reel I'm throwing it on is a Lew's Custom. It's a 6/8-to-1 reel, so it's kind of a medium speed retrieve. And the reason I like that, it's moving through the water column. It's a reactionary, typically reactionary style bait. And because of that, I want to kind of have that slower reel. I want to kind of keep this bait floating through the water column. And that 6/8-to-1 is a good gear speed ratio. Now, you can fish this on any reel. Don't get too much caught up into the gear ratio of your reel, but I prefer that medium retrieve. And the line I'm fishing is 15-pound fluorocarbon line. Now, what's so awesome about a jig is that you can fish it on basically any style of line. If you're fishing around really heavy grass, you can fish it on braid. If you're fishing around really open water and don't have 15-pound test line, you can fish it down to 10, 12-pound test, all the way up to like 25-pound test. It's really a versatile technique. You can fish on a variety of setups. But my go-to is a 7'3" medium heavy with a 6/8-to-1 reel and 15-pound fluorocarbon line. Let's get into the colors of jig that I like to throw. And I'm typically fishing more natural colors. I'm typically fishing this around cleaner water where those bass are keying in on what the bait actually looks like. So this is one of my favorite colors right here. It's called the Juice. It's got a little bit of that green pumpkin with blue hue and then a brown base. I also will fish a black and blue swim jig if I'm fishing around really dirty water, but I know those fish are keying in on bluegill. Black and blue's also a really good color. Crawfish colors can be really, really effective as well, especially if you know that there are crawfish in your body's water. For those of you guys that live down south, a white swim jig, like my boy Alex Rudd throws, is a great color to imitate those shad. Now, if you only have one color swim jig, I'm going to share with you guys a secret. You can make it look like whatever you want to look like by the trailer that you put on the back of it. So a swim jig is only half of the setup. The other half is the trailer that you're throwing on the back end of it. So I'm going to overlay some clips here pretty quickly, but the trailer that I was throwing in this video is the V&M J-Bug in the black and blue color. Swimming that jig up under there. Caught that one. Thanks, fish. Now, like I said, black and blue is great for that dirtier water, and the lake I was fishing had gotten dirty when I was out there fishing it. Visibility was less than 2 foot, so I switched to a black and blue trailer on the back of this natural colored jig, and it helped this bait stand out enough for those bass to key in on it. Now, when I'm fishing this bait, what I like to do, and why I like the J-Bug, is because of its versatility. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to bite it down just past these 2 flapping arms. So once you bite off those arms, basically this is what you're left with of that V&M J-Bug. Nothing more, essentially, than a double tail grub. And what I like about that J-Bug is you can modify it so much to make it look like a variety of different profiles. All I did was bite off the front half of it, and it changes the profile entirely. Now I'm going to take that bait, and I'm going to push it up onto this jig, so that way it comes off the back of that jig straight. I'm going in about a 1/2 inch, coming out the top side, and threading it up onto that jig, just like that. I did trim my jig skirt. I do not want the silicone material of this jig interfering with the action of the bait, so I trimmed it up to be just above where those legs start, so that way it has the most action it can possibly have. And that is what my swim jig looks like right there. It's a great, versatile presentation that you can fish in a variety of different water clarities, water types, based on the colors that you're throwing. So that V&M J-Bug is just one of the trailers that I like to use. A couple of the other trailers that I like to use are the Zoom Ultra Vibe Speed Craw, which is this bait right here. And just like that J-Bug, it has these kicking paddle tails, and it moves a lot of water. This color is the Alabama Craw. It's kind of a green pumpkin back with an orange belly. From fishing around bluegills, I'll fish green pumpkin colors, maybe some green pumpkin chartreuse. From fishing around shad, like my boy Alex Rudd down south, you take a white swim jig with a white trailer or a white and smoke trailer, and you can make it look like a variety of different shad. And the other trailers that I really like to use are these Rage Tail products. Now, the Rage Craws, the Space Monkeys basically have a bigger profile, but if you're looking for something with a ton of kick, the Rage Tail profiles work really well. So those are my 3 go-to jig trailers. So now that we've talked about the gear that I'm throwing, the trailers that I'm using for this bait, let's talk about where and when to throw a swim jig. Now, one of the best things about a swim jig is you can throw it all year long. So once you develop confidence in this bait, you can keep it with you no matter what time of year you're fishing. Anytime you're fishing shallow cover, a swim jig has the opportunity to play. Now, how am I fishing this bait? I'm making long casts. No matter where I'm fishing, I'm making a long cast, typically to a isolated or targeted piece of cover structure, whether that's, a dock, a point, whether there's some underwater grass. I'm trying to target something with it and key in on where those bass are fishing. And my retrieve on this is super simple. All I'm doing is taking that reel handle and slowly retrieving it and occasionally popping the bait. You got to think, there's not a ton of action on this bait aside from the kicking tails, so what these bass are going to do is come up and track that bait, and when that bait changes direction, changes speed, that's when they're going to grab that bait. I want to share with you guys this clip right here. I skipped the bait up under a dock, and I was swimming it out, no change in motion, and I turned to look to say something to the camera, and when I did that, I stopped my reel. When I stopped that, the bait that was coming straight through the water had fallen, and that's when I got my bite. Had I not changed the action of this bait, I probably wouldn't have caught that fish. So using a varied retrieve is also really important. So one of the other retrieves that people use for a swim jig, typically more down south, is what I believe Jordan Lee deemed the Alabama shake. You'll make a cast away from the boat, and when you're reeling that bait in, you're popping the rod. So you're basically moving the rod, making that bait kind of shake through the water while you're reeling it in. Now, that's not something I do. I'll just change my reel. I don't necessarily have the coordination to reel and pop at the same time. It's like rubbing your head and patting your belly, or rubbing your belly and patting your head. I don't have that coordination, but if you guys do, go ahead. Try to develop that technique, because it can be the difference between getting bites and not. The biggest thing when you're fishing a swim jig, though, is change that presentation. Whether it's shaking your rod, whether it's popping your reel, you need to change the way that bait's moving through the water column, because that's when you're going to trigger those big bass. I hope that this video gives you guys the confidence that you need to take out a jig to your home body of water, swim it around, and catch bass with. If you guys have any questions or comments, let us know down in the comment section below. I'll be responding to each and every one of you personally. Also, if you want to check out the Booyah Bankroll jig or the V&M J-Bug, we'll have it linked down to the Monster Bass store in the description below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.